Hi, we're here today in the forest to interview Frank Cervo, who works for the Connecticut DEP. So I'm going to let Frank introduce himself.
All right, hello everybody. I'm Frank Cervo. I am the Eastern District Service Forester with the Connecticut Department of Energy and Environmental Protection's Division of Forestry. And my primary job is assisting private forest landowners in the eastern 3 counties of Connecticut and giving them assistance, education, and general outreach about managing their forest land.
Thank you. What are the roles of forests in a healthy watershed?
Forests are a vital part of a healthy watershed, and they provide many different benefits to the watershed. It's tough to even think about the best place to start, but they provide a source of filtration for water that falls in the watershed. So the primary introduction of water into a watershed is from rainfall, and when that rainfall lands in a forested system, it has an opportunity to, it sort of passes through many different layers before it makes its way into the sort of surface water system. So you can think about raindrops that fall through a forest canopy, and they're slowed down on their way. So they're hitting leaves, they're hitting branches, twigs, through various layers of different vegetation, so that when they finally do hit the ground, they are moving at a slower velocity, so that decreases the amount of disturbance that those raindrops create on the soil. And then a lot of that water is then absorbed by the vegetation, right? Because all plants need water to survive. And so the water is absorbed by the plants and used, and then that forms a storage where the water is stored sort of upland from the surface water systems and the groundwater table, and so that prevents sort of large flood events and sort of big pulses of water into things like a stream or a river or a groundwater aquifer. So it gives you a more gradual introduction of water into those systems. You also have a very vibrant ecosystem, both above ground and below ground in a forest, which just creates, again, more sort of complexity and more layers for that water to be used and pass through, instead of just going directly into a stream or a river, where it might interrupt the processes there. Another important benefit to a healthy watershed is regulation of those surface water systems. So things like a river, the temperature dynamics in a river can have very important consequences for the riverine flora and fauna, the plants and animals that live in those streams. And forests play a really important role for regulating temperature, regulating nutrient compositions, and in addition to the previously mentioned sort of regulation of the water flow itself.
Great. So our forests are a really primary important filter for water quality in this watershed, as well as the groundwater that eventually slowly makes its way to keep those streams flowing during non-rainy periods.
Right, and thank you, Jean, for also mentioning the groundwater. I think I mentioned it briefly, but it is also very important the way that sort of groundwater systems are recharged by sort of slow infiltration, right? And if water falls on an open area, or an area that doesn't have a lot of vegetation on it, or something like, you know, an impervious surface like a parking lot, or heavily compacted soil, where the water is not able to easily infiltrate into it, then that will negatively impact the quality of the water in those groundwater aquifers. And So beyond our other surface water systems, having a healthy forest above and in the recharge areas for groundwater aquifers is also imperative to maintaining their quality.
And that's important in this watershed where the majority of people upstream of the Natchaug Reservoir actually get their water from groundwater sources. Predominant features of this watershed are some forests that are managed by the Connecticut DEP, including Natchaug Forest, Natchaug Forest, and a piece of the Goodwin Forest. And each one of those have forest management plans, which we're not going to get into. We will have links to those forest management plans on our site for anybody who wants to read them. But what kind of factors play into developing a forest management plan? You just don't leave it to chance. There's things that are considered when developing a forest management plan.
Yes, so it's very important that the forests are managed according to a well thought out management plan that's grounded in our best understandings of science and the processes that are happening in the forest there. And so the DEP undergoes a very involved management plan process for all of the forests that we manage, and they consider a wide array of different resources that the forest is managed to provide. That include things like water quality, which we're talking about today, air quality, climate change mitigation in the forms of carbon sequestration and storage, forest products, both timber and non-timber forest products, and those are several of the many different resources that the forests are managed to provide. Also things like public recreation and a source of habitat for wildlife. And yes, so there's a very extensive process, as I mentioned, that goes into developing a management plan. There are many. We get a lot of input from all the various agencies within the Department of Energy and Environmental Protection, as well as partner organizations, and as well as a lot of feedback from the general public. That's a very important piece, right? Because these are public resources which we all own, and where the benefits are intended to be provided, the maximum benefit for the most amount of people. So.
Very good. How does DEEP factor in forest resiliency as they're thinking about climate change and the health of the forests?
Yeah, so that is a great question. So managing forests in the face of climate change is a very important, very difficult task, but it's something that we consider as one of our our primary motivations. It's very important that forests are able to respond to potential disturbances, and it's important to note that disturbance is an important part of a forested system, right? It's something. There's disturbances happen all the time, and that could be anything from a wildfire to a hurricane to a drought to an insect outbreak. Could be a native insect, an invasive insect, or something a little bit more nebulous, but still has the potential to really have a drastic impact on a forest. Something like perhaps elevated temperatures in the face of climate change, or a different composition of elements in the air, something that that we might see as a result of climate change, or different more temperature fluctuations, increased periods of increased rainfall or extended drought, or more episodic storm events, some of the things that we're projected to see in the face of climate change. And having a vigorous forest that's composed of vigorous trees that are growing, sort of with a lot of resources available to them, and they're able to maintain a lot of health and vigor. That makes sort of on an individual tree basis, the trees more able to respond positively, or at least not be destroyed by a disturbance. And then when you extrapolate that to a whole, the scale of an entire forest or an entire landscape, it's important not only that each individual tree be vigorous, but that you have large diversity of different tree species, different forest types, different communities, and that they be well adapted to the land and the things like the geology, soil, hydrological composition of the places where they are. And so those are just some of the ways that things that we consider when managing forests in the face of climate change.
What kind of recreational activities are available on our state forests?
Yeah, so recreation is a very important resource that the forests provide to the people, and things like non-motorized recreation, and perhaps we could cut this piece out. I kind of stumbled a little bit there.
Okay.
But well, maybe, I don't know. Maybe you could edit it out of the video. I'll keep going. Maybe
Okay.
I'll just sort of start over. But we have so recreation is one of the many important benefits that forests provide, and they're available for and open to the public. But please do follow all posted signs and check our website for more information about which type of activities are available in which forests. There's some sort of specific recommendations. For example, the Goodwin Forest, in which we find ourselves right now, is not open to hunting, and that's specific to the Goodwin State Forest. So, and there are various different sort of nuances to some of the state properties. So just please do check with any posted resources at the forest and online to find out which types of recreation are compatible on different forests.
Thank you. Hunting is a very popular activity for people, and it is definitely a use for our forests. I would like you to talk a little bit about deer populations and their impact on forest health.
Yeah, so deer are a very important component of a forested ecosystem here in Connecticut, and they, depending on the different pieces of the food chain and how they're all interacting with each other, deer populations can sort of wax and wane, and so at times where your larger trophic levels, your predator populations, which typically sort of balance out deer populations, when those populations are lower, or we have less of those predators in the forest, then deer populations can grow, and when they can sometimes reach a point where they can negatively impact forest health. And that's, generally speaking, it happens in the way of by deer browse, right? So when there are many deer, or populations are very high, the deer can start to eat things which are not sort of their preferred food. You can sort of think about it the way when food is scarce, you might have to eat something that is not your typical diet. And in the forest, that oftentimes you find deer browsing on our regenerating trees, right? So young tree seedlings, the deer they start to eat tree seedlings, and then that decreases the amount of tree seedlings that are growing in the forest and impedes their ability to regenerate and create future forest canopy trees. And so that can be a large impediment to the regeneration of a forest. And then they also, there are many invasive plant species which, because they're not native to our region, the deer populations are not accustomed to eating them. And even in those times of hardship where the deer are browsing on their non-preferred browse items, they still, in many cases, they're not able, or they don't choose to browse on the invasive plants. And so they sort of tip the scales in favor of those plants, because the deer have eaten away what might have been their competition, the competition of the invasive plants, that is, and then they don't eat those plants as well. So you can see that the deer sort of help to facilitate further invasion by non-native plant species, which also has negative impacts to forest health.
Well, you've given us a great overview of our state forest. Do you have any closing thoughts about the role of the forest in the watershed, and what people might want to know about helping to preserve forest health?
Well, yeah, I could say a couple things. The first being that there's a lot more information available to the public about the forest management plan process, and I do encourage you all to inquire more about that and to learn more about the process that we, as the Division of Forestry, undergo when we're writing those management plans. And the foresters who oversee that process, have a lot of expertise and knowledge, and they put a lot of time and thought into putting those plans together, as well as all of the other folks who contribute to that process. And so keep that in mind, and definitely we welcome, and in fact we need your involvement and your input into that process. As the public, we're all we're all meant to benefit from this incredible resource that's here, and so it's important that we have a lot of involvement from the public, and also just so the benefits that forests provide to society, and especially here we're focusing on the healthy watershed. A lot of the benefits are tangible, and a lot of them are sort of intangible, right? So with a little bit of thought and consideration, and the more that you learn about how forests are impacting your life, it can just be it can sort of be overwhelming, the number of things, the way that these forests are impacting all of us, and the things that they're doing for society. But I personally find it very, very inspiring, and I hope that you all will as well.
Okay.